Hey everyone, Karen the Warp Spinster here. Thank you for visiting my channel and spending some time with me today. Please remember to like and subscribe, you know the routine. Today I am leaving spider webs behind me for a while, and I'm going to try something I've been thinking in my head for a while, and we'll see how it goes. You know how it goes, actually, don't you? And that is an X block. So I'm thinking of a hugs and kisses kind of quilt, improv wonkified, and I want to start with the X. And I have white and black and strips of all sorts, black strips, black and white strips, stripes, my usual fare here. And we'll look at some ways to do the X block, a wonkified X block. What, you know, it may turn into awkward hugs, but there are awkward hugs in life. So we'll give that a try with different combinations, different ways to do it, staying away from any template kind of thing, of course. And we'll just have fun with it and see where it goes. So thanks for being here with me, and let's get started with some ideas. Let's start with one that's probably fairly obvious, and that's just to cut an X in this. So we'll start by, and I'm just starting with, I think this is about 5 inches of white. We'll explore some other options. I know not everyone is a white background fan. So I'm going to cut this corner to corner. Now I could do it exactly, but we aren't necessarily about exactitude here. And then I will insert a strip in here of some sort. May well throw this off, but we're wonkifying, so we aren't worried about that at this point. And I could put in just a plain black stripe. I could put in black and white. I could put in a stripe, which, you know, I always think is kind of fun. Or I could put in a print or a solid. I think I'm going to start with a solid just so we kind of get a general idea of what we're doing. We have a reasonably presentable stripe, and I don't need this to be a straight piece. In fact, I want it to be a little bit wonky, so I'm going to cut it a little bit wonky, and I'm going to try to do it such that I can use the other piece, either in the same one or in a different block. And now all I'm going to do is sew this, which is going to wonkify it. It's okay. We're all right with that. We're all about setting our own rules and then breaking those too. So I'll sew that in there and be back. I wasn't necessarily trying to line up the corners, but I did a pretty good job actually. So now I've got that one, and I want to cut another X in here. Of course, these can be any width, very skinny, very wide. They can be, sort of match in their width, the two cuts, or be quite different. So let me do, what other plain colors do I have here? I have a bright yellow, which is not very presentable either. And if you saw the drawer where I'm keeping these, you can understand why that is, but this is real life, right? So now this one, I want to be pretty wide as compared to the other one. And I'm going to have a little waist there, but it's leftover scrap strip anyway. And sew that in. I'm not going to worry about these matching across there, because they ultimately aren't going to anyway. So let's keep it reasonably close to, let's have it least wonkified, just because we're only starting out here and we're figuring out how we want to do this and what level of wonkification we can tolerate, right? So I will sew this one and be back. And then we'll talk about other options, because this is kind of blah, to be honest. And here's an X block that is mildly wonkified. We aren't perfectly straight across here. This isn't perfectly on the corner, and we have two different colors here, and it's really not quite square. But we are going to sort of square this up, and it may or may not be straight when we finish. So I could trim this so that I have a parallelogram square here. Or for now, we can always do that later. For now, let's just trim it in a wonkified fashion. And we have what we'll call an awkward hug. Now that we've gotten just the basics of this particular way to do an axe, let's think about other things we could do. Of course, we talked about having different types of fabrics, both in the background and on the top. But we could also splice some things in on these strips. We could actually have this be pieced, so it's several different fabrics going across here, and same for here. We could, of course, well, here's something we could do. Once we have put in this initial one, then we could, after we slice it, swap these out and do another block, another square that is the same, sliced again, and then match up those different halves with different stripes down the middle, so we'd have different blocks. We'll do that just because I'm probably not explaining it very well. And of course we could do fancy stitching. Another thing we could do, and this might be interesting, let me grab some 2.5-inch squares here. I'm doing 2.5-inch squares just because that's what I have. I have lots of 2.5-inch squares. So we could do a 4-patch sort of deal here. And then I could cut each one of these and put a different strip in it and then join those together as a 4-patch. So that's an option. In fact, let's try that. And I think in the middle of these, I will do, what do you think about a black and white strip? That'd be too much with the, yeah, that's too much with the print. Maybe a black and white stripe, but maybe just plain black or plain white. I don't know. Wow, that's, well, you know, if it's a narrower strip, that might be a little wild, even for me. Can you believe that came out of my mouth? All right. Could do a smaller strip. You know, if we had larger squares and bigger things of print, then I think we could handle a bigger stripe. I don't know. Let's try it with a black strip. See if we like it in concept. All right, so I'm just going to split these into, cut them diagonally, and I don't have to be too precise about it, or I can be if I want to be. And now I will splice some black into the middle of each of these and put them together. I think having that consistent solid in there will tie it together into an X rather than it being just 4 different diagonally split and spliced blocks. So I will do that. I'll cut some of these. They probably won't be a consistent width. I'll make them kind of wonky wedge shapes. And then I'll sew those in. We'll see where we're at. And I'm sure you thought of this before I did. My brain is not working lickety-split today. We could, when we sew these, the second side to them, we could swap these out. So we could sew that here, put that on here, move this over here, etc. So that's an option. And, you know, I might try it just because that's sort of what we were talking about with this one and swapping out the halves. So let's give it a go on this one while we're at it. All right, before we start swapping these out, I want to just see, while we have them all here, how they would look if we kept those 4 corners fabrics together. And that's okay, I kind of like that. It's not bad. So that would be an option. And yes, I am sewing these with white thread. I will forestall anyone commenting on it because I'm going to be using so many fabrics. I'm just leaving white on. I've got the stitch length down so shorter so that it won't show. And if I were doing a lot of these, I would use black thread, but I'm using white. I am pressing seams to the darker. Now, I don't dislike that at all. Let's see how it would look if we started swapping. Well, let's swap out corners first, opposite corners. And we can see how that looks. That's not bad either. Looks a little more random. And then if we just kind of do it willy-nilly, I'll probably end up with it not being very willy-nilly because I've run out of options. So that's another way. Actually, I kind of like it, I think, at opposite corners. So I think I would want to do that. See, now I'm overthinking things, aren't I? Let's do it this way. And we'll see how we feel about that. These are going to be narrower pieces than on here, but then this is a smaller block. Apologies for the abrupt change in light. It is stormy here and getting darker by the minute, so I set up a ring light, which I generally don't like to do, but I think it will help today. Now, we have these. Oh, and on another note, because these are narrow strips, and on another note, because these are narrow strips of black, on the first seam that I did, I trimmed it so that when I folded over the next seam, there wouldn't be any conflict there. All right. Now we're going to see if I can remember how, whoops, that won't work, Karen. How I had these arranged. So now I am going to sew these together, and you can see they are no longer the same size or shape, but, and I'm not going to worry too much about how they match in the center because they are different thicknesses here in the center. So they aren't going to match perfectly anyway. This is going to be interesting. I'm almost, no, I don't think so, because one way or another there's going to be a thin one in the center. We'll see how it looks. Because they are narrower strips, it reads less like an X than, say, a broken dishes with some stuff spliced in the center, but we'll see how it looks. I want to straighten this seam. This is why I don't like to use a ring light. I'm going to straighten this seam, but it won't necessarily be straight. It will be, it will be straight, but not necessarily perpendicular to that line. And now we have the question of, do I want these to actually meet in the center, or do I want them offset? You see the X more here, but I think if I offset it a little, it's going to be more interesting. And once this joins here, once we get the seam in there, I think it will look more like an X. So I'm going to try to offset it. Time will tell, partially because I've got so much bulk here with those seams from the X. So I will try to offset that bulk some as well. And here is another wonkified X, which, you know, just looks sort of like my usual handwriting. So we have two different versions here, quite different, but still X's. This one, because of this bulk, I think I want to just play some more with this and doing different things here. So I want to start out with, I think, a square that is a black and white print. And I will have to dig around to find that, and then have solids here. Then we'll try it with a black square and maybe some black and white prints in it. For more of a subtle one. A shouting subtlety with the print. And then probably a black with print pieces here. But I also want to try it where I'm splicing some things in here. And then also piecing one of these strips, which I guess isn't going to be that much different from prints, but if they're solids that I'm piecing, then I think it might be different. So we have several things to try. All right. I think offsetting it was fine. There is still a great deal of bulk under there, a honkin' big bunch of bulk under there, which would be a consideration when deciding whether or not you wanted to do a block this way. If you are, well, certainly if you're hand quilting, which I'm guessing probably not going to be on a modern quilt in most cases. But even machine quilting, that's a lot for a machine to go through. So there's a consideration. And now we get to, it's even going to be a problem. I'm going to square this up off camera because the ring light thing will bother me. It probably won't be square, but I'm going to trim it so that the edges at least are straight and even. While I was cutting some black squares, I thought, you know, what it would be like if we didn't start out with the square, but we had a long piece. So I did that also with a black square, but also the black and white square. And we've got a couple of plans for black backgrounds. And then I thought, well, let's try something fun and funky in the background. So I pulled out this Tula Pink. I'm not sure how this is going to look because this is a regular pattern. Everything is regularly spaced. When we start splicing in pieces, and that starts getting shifted around, I don't know. We'll see how we like it. And then I bought some Cafe backing fabric for my Roots and Branches sample, and I thought that would be kind of fun to try. It's an irregular large pattern, so I think it will be less of an issue. And this one we might use black and white, I don't know. Maybe that's a little, too much contrast with that pastel. Well, we'll get there. We may be doing this for more than this week at the rate we're going. All right, the first thing I want to do is this one isn't really square either, which is all right. Let's try cutting this, and then I want to piece some solids to make the stripe through here. And do they have to be solids? No, but I'm going to do solids. I like solids, so some of this is going to be solids or near solids. So let me pull some of my solid bright strips and piece something to go in there. I'm liking this very much so far. I think that I have made an error in putting this single black strip in there because that's going to be cut and probably lost in the seam, but lesson learned, right? Or I could, it would have to be a very, well, okay, we're just going to do it. Lessons are learned every day, especially in my household and my brain. So I'll go ahead and slice this. I really like that black strip in there though. If I were to do another one, I would move that so that it wouldn't get ousted from it. Now I can do a single color going through. I don't like that. Or I could do a print going through. As the other piece of the X. Or, sorry, I keep bumping the camera holder table. Or, here's a thought. I'm trying to combine different ideas into one block so that we can see how it looks without having to make a gazillion blocks. Or even half a gazillion. We could also do, let's try black and white stripe. We didn't look at that yet, did we? Can't imagine why we haven't, because that's just necessary, isn't it? Then it doesn't look as much like an X, and it doesn't necessarily have to. Of course, we aren't requiring that our inspiration ends up being in the final one. But I think that bringing in a color that is in here, maybe, do I have enough of this green? I don't think I do, actually, to make it look more like an X, if that is our goal. I'm kind of liking this whole thing. That's a whole other story. We may be doing more than 1 week of this. I think I want to put this in. So I will do that, and then we'll think about another option. I like this, actually. I do wish that this piece were somewhere else and that I had 1 or 2 other very narrow black strips in here, just because this looks, I don't know, almost like an error in there, but it's okay. It's okay. I like this, and I like the stripping idea. A stripped strip. Now I want to try something with this, and I don't know how it's going to turn out. It may be a little wild on the eyes, but let's do a slice here, and then splice in a stripe And I think I want it to be narrower than that. Do I want it to be, yes, let's try it being a wedge shape instead of a straight strip, because that is part of what's going to throw this out of alignment, this background print, among other things like, seams. But let's see how that looks if it's just too much for the eye to handle. So I will splice that in, and then maybe we'll take a look at, first of all, how it looks that way, and then can we, and maybe I want to just purposely start sliding it like that. And if that becomes too much for the eye, then can we splice in something this direction that's going to give the eye some rest? We'll see. All right, I'm already having issues with this stripe. Now, if it had been going this direction, I think it would have been all right. And maybe I will take this out and do that because I know this is going to bother me. I like wonky, but somehow that is more than I think I can take. And so I was just thinking, what if I put a print that is light color across there? I don't hate it with this background. I just don't like this stripe being in that orientation. So I think I will take that out and do a stripe that is that direction, because I know no matter how I proceed with this, I'm not going to like it because I don't like that. Now, it may be something that you like, and that's great, but I'm just not going to like it, and I don't want to waste the whole block for one strip. So I am going to take that out. I did shorten my stitch length, didn't I? And then I will be back. All right, to my eye, that is much better. I can put in another piece like that. I'm sorry if I hope this is not throwing anybody's eyes in the brain out of commission here. Or do I want to soften it, so to speak, with a different kind of print, maybe even a different black and white print? Which is, I don't know, kind of interesting. That's more striking. I don't know. That is almost, this floral is, I don't know. It almost doesn't look right to me. How about a plain black strip? Nope, that's not doing it for me. What if I spliced in a few white strips in this? So it would be contrast to this, but still kind of in keeping with it. I know, I like to be wild sometimes. I'm not sure that today is one of those days. Could certainly do something like that. But again, I guess my eye is kind of wanting to be able to see that as an X. And that would not necessarily be true. I could see this X as a starting point, and then whatever I devise from that doesn't need to look like an X. The eye need not perceive that as just a single design. But, all right, I want to try splicing in some white strips here. See how that looks. And tomorrow, next week, it might look different to my eye. This looks interesting to me. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it. I think I like it. I'm going to splice it in. It's going to be narrower when I do that. but it is fairly straight, that it is more of a strip than a wedge, which I may want to change. Do I want to change that? Now, I think this bit will be what makes it different from other things. So we're going to try that out. We shall see. As always, we don't know where we're going, right? As you can see, I've decided to make this cut quite far off the diagonal. I hope I don't live to regret that, but we're trying many things. We will see. Now this looks to me like a railroad crossing sign. That's what I love about wonkified quilts and abstract, is just different things that you see in it, which are different from what other people see in it. I love that about quilts like this. All right, well, we have tried out a variety of things here. I expect that some of the things I like, you may not. Some of the things that I don't like, you might like. That's another of the fun things about this kind of quilt. We are just playing and exploring. I think there are several other things I want to try, including curves and some other things, which I think, a couple of other kind of crazy things, but not unusual for me things, that I want to try next week. So I think that will be it for today. Let me know which one of these is your favorite, or that one for that matter. That one's a little, I don't know, it's a little much for me. Can you believe it? But I do like all of these three for different reasons. This one's a little, I want to say blah exactly, but it needs a little something something, which might be one of these ideas in a spliced here. It might be some stitching going across it. Who knows? But, ooh, I have another idea. Next week. All right, so here are a few awkward hugs that we did this week. And next week we will try some more, and we may get started on the kisses part of the program, but this is it for hugs this week. I hope I will see you next week when we explore some more. In the meantime, be well, be safe, be happy, be quilting. Peace out.